A new report by prominent Democratic advocacy groups concluded that the party is, quote, at risk of losing ground with Black, Hispanic, and Asian American voters unless it does a better job presenting an economic agenda.
According to Latino Dems, the party has been ignoring Mexican Americans in Texas, New Mexico, and California. And over the weekend, a historically blue town in southern Texas elected a Republican mayor who ran on improving the economy.
Democratic strategist and senior VP at Firehouse Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins, and former chairwoman of the Nevada State GOP and Republican strategist Amy Tarkanian join us now to discuss. Welcome to both of you. So, Michael, what do you make of this report? How is it that Democrats have made such an emphasis on racial justice over the last several years, and yet now this major report finds them at risk of losing ground among those very voters?
I think there's a couple problems. When you look at African Americans, I think there's an assumption that African Americans are very progressive. And while no group is monolithic, African Americans tend to be more conservative than I think most Democrats understand. Part of that being that we understand incremental change is something that is kind of the constant. But also we are very much cemented in religious aspects, which I think make African Americans trend more conservative. Also, when you look at the Latino vote, I think Democrats have often lumped Latinos together rather than looking at the individual groups, whether it be Puerto Ricans, whether it be Mexican Americans, whether it be Ecuadorians, El Salvadorians. I think Democrats need to do a better job of speaking to individual communities rather than this monolithic conversation. And then when you look at issues like defund the police, the intent was there. And I think what actually the conversation we should have been having was one about how we go about giving more money to mental health organizations and such. But bad messaging really affected those communities.
Now, Amy, speaking of bad messaging, Republicans don't exactly have a sterling brand with minority demographics, and that's very important to note. So from your perspective, how can Republicans perhaps capitalize in the way that it happened in this race on waning or poor Democratic Party strategy when it comes to reaching these minorities? Is it sort of Trumpy populism? Is it just talking economics, kitchen table issues? What's the way for Republicans to actually capitalize on struggles the Democrats might be experiencing?
Well, I actually think that you're correct with all of those that you just listed. And I actually agree with Michael as well in the fact where the Democrats, they have assumed that they're always going to get the minorities vote. They need to focus on things like you just mentioned, like the economy. Surprise, surprise, they actually like to keep most of their paycheck. They like to put food on the table for their families. They liked the fact that for the first time under President Trump, we had in 50 years the lowest unemployment for minorities and for women. They actually appreciate the fact that we have America First priorities because guess what? They're here in America, so they can appreciate that. They like the fact that there's law and order. Why do you think a lot of these people are so ready to cross the border illegally, despite how dangerous it is? It's because they are fleeing areas where they are not excelling and it's dangerous. So they want law and order here. So what the Republicans need to do, and what we have done a poor job on, is continuing to stay engaged with the minority groups, not just doing it when it's time to campaign. And that's where Democrats have excelled. They remain in these areas. But once again, like Michael said, they can't just assume and take them for granted and lump them all into one conglomerate.
And Michael, when Democrats do talk about a pocketbook issue, and particularly in 2020, when they went to that well, they would talk about two things. They would say they're going to protect pre-existing conditions and they were going to lower drug prices. You poll that, it's practically 100%. Everybody's supportive of that. It didn't move the needle in any of these districts. Can you walk us through how, in the Democratic strategy world, you get to a place where Democrats decide that spending tens or hundreds of millions of dollars on this messaging that clearly didn't work actually gets executed?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the problem with doing focus groups and not really staying on the ground year round when it comes to party infrastructure. When you have year round infrastructure, you really get to know the electorate, and you know what they want, you know what they need, you know what they're afraid of, and you know kind of where the essence and balance of the party is. And I think in states like Florida and Texas, what we've seen is 6 months before a primary, the party puts up infrastructure, and then as soon as the election day is over, that infrastructure is gone. We're starting to see more investments in year-round infrastructure, which I think is really going to help Democrats. But the thing I think is really going to propel Democrats more so than anything else is Republicans' efforts at these voter suppression laws. Because not only are we now seeing African Americans show up in historic rates almost to the level of President Obama, but we're seeing new voter registration drives through people like Stacey Abrams that I think are going to turn what would be a midterm election into what's going to look like a on-cycle election. And I think that's going to be something that for Republicans is going to be a negative and a boon for Democrats.
So to tie a bow on this conversation, I want to throw something to both of you. First, Marco Rubio said in an interview that the argument from the left is that this country is a place that has not been good for people other than the majority over much of our history. And Hispanics just don't buy it. And the reason why they don't buy it is very simple. They know what life is like in another country. Zed Jelani, a friend of this show, replied, on this, Marco Rubio is 100% correct. Surveys consistently show that new Americans, immigrants, are much more optimistic and hopeful about America than people who've never had a basis for comparison. So, Michael, I'm going to toss that to you, and then I'll get Amy's response. What do you make of that as a Democratic strategist? What do you make of the contention that, you know, there's a more sort of positive outlook on this country? The DNC last year the production of the DNC was fascinatingly patriotic, and more than you see from, I think, rhetoric-wise, a lot of Democratic candidates. What do you make of this?
Look, African Americans were brought here under servitude and in shackles. And so there isn't the same kind of relation that there are to immigrants who voluntarily came here fleeing persecution from their countries. And so I think when you look at narratives, immigrants look at this country very differently because they don't have the same pained experience that the African American community does. So I think it goes back to we have to figure out how to talk to people and meet them where they are, rather than just lumping minority groups together and assuming that all Black people are necessarily African American in identity.
What do you think, Amy? Is this hurting Democrats and helping Republicans?
Yes, it is. And in fact, what Michael just mentioned is, of course, it's true. It's sad and it's unfortunate, but it's true and it's part of our history. And that's okay to go ahead and share that history so it's not repeated with our youth. However, when you have critical race theory that is threatening the minds of our youth, basically shaming one for their skin color, and they can't change that, basically shaming somebody for what their ancestors may have done instead of teaching personal responsibility in math, science, reading, and arithmetic. This is going to be extremely dangerous. The rest of the world can see this. They're laughing at us with this woke culture that is infiltrating their minds in our schools, in our college universities, and they are looking at us like we are spoiled brats, plain and simple.
And so Republicans have really latched on to this argument, and they have elevated to a point where I think it goes back to what Michael was saying earlier, that a lot of immigrant communities and the Black community have divergent political viewpoints, and there are a lot of conservatives within each of these communities. And if Republicans can successfully get those voting blocs to polarize around their ideology, around conservative versus progressive, they're going to be able to peel off a lot of those. Whereas if they can have them polarize around party identity, then Democrats are going to do much better with them, because you have this extraordinary effort from Republicans to suppress the minority vote at the exact time that they're doing better among those voters. Yeah, it's like they don't want to.
The perfect example is when President Biden said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. And then they chose Kamala Harris, who is disliked across the board, even within her own party, to pander towards the female and African American vote, the minority vote. Her background is diverse. She has actually already portrayed that she's not ready for prime time. And the people aren't stupid. I think the fact that Democrats are telling minorities, this is how you're going to vote, or else you are not a smart person. Republicans are messaging it completely different, where they're saying, hey, we support a strong economy. We support America First principles. We support your family structure. And that actually resonates much more than the shaming that the Democrats are doing.
Michael, finish us off here. Give us that response. Yeah. I can see it coming.
Real quick. I just want to say, now Vice President Harris was Attorney General of California, one of the biggest states in the union, was the sole African-American female senator in the Senate. The idea that she wasn't prepared to be vice president, I think, is ludicrous. Now, does she have some things that she needs to work on, just like every other politician? I think that's absolutely true. But I think Republicans will continue to make the same mistake and decrease their chances of increasing the African-American vote as long as they continue to talk about and Vice President Harris in that way and use words like critical race theory. For the life of me, Trump got 8% of the African-American vote, more than Mitt Romney got, but they continue to do these things that stop them from ever being able to break 10%.
Right, and Republicans who put Sarah Palin on the ticket have no ground to talk about either qualifications or playing identity politics. Both of those are implicated by that pick. But more Team Rising comes up right after this.